people, meaning Germans, assume they come here and everything is the same, right? We look the same, somewhat of a different language. Okay, we all had some English in school. We can bridge that, no problem. When you then come here, people are nice and everything is cool. When you try to do business here, there is actually a different culture and there is distinct differences between Germany and the US.
Europe builds it. America scales it. Welcome to Transatlantic Titans, the show where bold and visionary Europeans show how they are making it big in America. From challenges to lessons learned and massive opportunities, we bring you the people and ideas shaping the future of transatlantic business. And now, here is your host, the lawyer for Europeans making it big in America, Manny Schoenhuber.
Welcome to Transatlantic Titans, the show about Europeans making it big in America. I am your host, Manny Schoenhuber, and today we have another very special guest, another Transatlantic Titan who came over to the US in the more classic formal fashion, but then, as the Americans would say, pivoted to a more private and probably advisory role as we discuss it later on today. And I'm very excited to have Thomas Rechtien on this episode today. Thomas, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We've known each other for quite some time already, professionally as well as outside of the office. So maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself. Who is Thomas? Where are you from? What's your career trajectory so far?
Yeah, my name is Thomas Rechtien. I'm originally from Neuss, Germany. That won't tell many Americans anything. It's real close to Düsseldorf on the, what we say, nicer side of the River Rhine. About 40 minutes drive from Cologne, which is actually my favorite soccer club in good and in bad times.
To start the conversation with that.
Yeah, well, so you asked, that's where I'm from. My career actually started out very traditional in a bank. I liked math in school. My parents thought it was a good idea. We talked a little bit, so I did a banking apprenticeship. But when I didn't like that anymore, I resigned from that job. We had just taken out our mortgage. My wife was pregnant for the third time out of 4, and I came home and told her that I'm looking for something new. So coincidentally, I fell into the steel business and really fell in love with it. And I've done that for over 20 plus years. And yeah, what brought me over to the US is actually Salzgitter, the second biggest steel maker. I ran their US operations based here in Houston until 2023.
So a lot to unpack there, lots to unravel, but maybe starting at the obvious question, why the US? Did you actually approach Salzgitter about coming to the US, or was that more of an invitation for you to come to the US? How did that unfold?
I would call it a push-pull. The push came first, which is I talked to my wife and said, look, I'm really interested to explore the world. Like there's so much out there, right? I've been on a couple of vacations across Europe, not so much outside, but I wanted to explore it. I wanted to live somewhere else and just see something else. And kind of, I also thought it's good for the career, right? You have a couple of years abroad or something, like it doesn't hurt to do that. You get to know other cultures, other ways of looking at the world and what's going on. And that fascinated me. So my wife said at the time, okay, Thomas, that's all cool. I'll come with you. We'll bring the kids. 2 things I will not do. I'll not go to Russia and I'll not go to Kazakhstan. Everything else is fair game. I'm like, okay, I can work with that. So I went to actually the CEO at the time at Salzgitter and said, well, I would like to go abroad. And here's the 2 exclusions I have. US was always a dream for me. And that's what they offered me. So there were other things on the table at some point that might or might not have gotten interesting, but US is what they offered. So obviously I said yes. And yeah, we moved here in 2015 now, 11 years ago. So from we give you a 3-year contract, you see how it goes. And if you don't like it, you can come back to it's been 11 years and I'm not with Salzgitter anymore.
So has the dream of the US or the American dream then always been a professional dream, or was it also like a fascination that you've developed even like in childhood? And maybe why?
It was somewhat of a fascination, not necessarily from childhood onwards, but part of it, I don't know, like pickup trucks, for example, fascinated me. The national parks fascinated me, right? There are so many cool things to see here. It's such a huge country. Just thinking about when we moved from Chicago here to Houston, it took us 2 days of driving with an overnight stay at the Texas border in Texarkana, Texas. And that was exactly halfway. So half the trip, 1 full day driving was in Texas. Like that state is so big. Plus, obviously, looking at Texas specifically, which at the time I think was the eighth biggest economy in the world. And now it's the sixth biggest economy with the four hubs of Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and Houston, where, yeah, I mean, it's a good breeding ground to be in business. So it was both a fascination from the business side, but also a fascination personally. I've seen different things. I've been at the start point of Route 66 in Chicago and the end point in California and some points in between. And there's real cool stuff to see here and still to explore after 11 years.
Yeah, so maybe walk us through that, because you had the discussion with the CEO. You said, let's go to the US. But as you mentioned, you didn't go to Houston right away, right? I think you first landed in Chicago and then made your way down south. Kind of walk us through the vast geographic areas that you've covered so far.
Yeah. It started in Chicago. I was in charge of a steel distribution place that belonged to the group, which was somewhat struggling. And we did a turnaround of sorts, if you will, there, got it to not lose money anymore or make a little profit. And then eventually in 2018, they got me back to the international side and I took over the automotive business again out of the Chicago office. So mainly selling to German OEMs. And then 2020, when COVID hit, my colleague who I was working with in the Chicago office retired and the decision was taken to close the office. So they moved me down to Houston. And then a couple of years later, I took over as the president and CEO of the Houston office.
Okay, so obviously quite a trajectory. And what was it like for you to run the show really as the president and CEO of a quite well-known and well-established German company in the US?
I mean, it was super interesting. And it was also, well, in parts difficult because you constantly do some, I want to call it transatlantic translation between what the headquarters want and how they look at things and what is possible here in this market, how customers, how other employees look at it, what the perception is of what it should be. Like you're trying to put yourself in every different perspective and look at one thing from at least three different angles. So you can kind of explain all these viewpoints to the different parties involved and really come up with a good way to handle it in the end. So it was super interesting. I really loved the work. It was a great time.
So you were in charge as the president and CEO, like you said. How many employees did you guys have at the peak?
We ended up with 12 in the Houston office. When it all was still bigger, we had Chicago and the markets were different. We were doing triple them and we had triple the amount of people. So close to 30 over two offices. And then after COVID, we brought it down to 12 people in one office, but we made tremendously more money because the focus was really on everything that was making money. So the things that were not so successful or more risky in the business, we just didn't do anymore. And that ended up being a good way to go about it.
What was the focus in terms of business relationships, customers? Because let's say 10 to 15 employees in Houston servicing the entire US, right? That's quite a task to fulfill. So did you have specific targets, specific operations that helped you get through all of this, in addition to dealing with a German parent company that's 6 to 7 hours ahead of schedule when it comes to time differences?
Yeah. I mean, from the setup, it was really that we were focusing on 400 products we could make in the group ourselves. So that was some of the support you were asking about. Many is that, like in line pipe, for example, Salzgitter has their own mill in Germany for the automotive flat walled material. They have the flush down mill in Salzgitter. And then there's various mills that can help on the oil and gas side with OCTG tubing. And yeah, that was some of the focus. It's really kind of, it's not tailor-made, but it's a very much engineered product that works for certain specific end markets. So it's anything but everyday vanilla. So that kind of narrows down the markets and the people we had to talk to on the sales side. And then there was the trading division, which was whatever we could buy somewhere and sell with profit in the US is also something we would discuss, but the focus was really on the homegrown products or home-rolled products, if you will, in that case. The other thing was, like on the transportation side, for example, there was the transport department in Germany. So we had various support departments that we could tap into for all kinds of support that we needed on the IT side, so that we could really, besides these relationships, we could focus on the buying and selling of steel.
Maybe that's to get a comparison between the behemoth, I would say, in Germany, right? Thousands of employees, and then you more of an agile unit within the group in Houston, you running the show, as we've already discussed, Was there any formal approaches, or did you have a lot of leeway in kind of structuring it? Because again, you ran the US market, so to speak, within a highly successful group of companies.
Salzgitter is certainly big about compliance and sticking with the rules. And that's what we did, be that about like signature rights or authority. So that's clearly handled and reported back and forth between the headquarters and the local unit. But really, we had, well, I don't want to say the freedom, but it was a freedom. We had the ability to approach the market in whatever way, shape, or form we wanted. We obviously talked about management to that, and they agreed or didn't agree on an approach, and then we adjusted. But within the given competencies, we could move very freely, which is somewhat of a luxury I guess you have when you're abroad, because it's a different market. And we were the experts here, knowing the culture, knowing the market sentiment, seeing it from this side of the pond, which is oftentimes different than when you look over from the other side.
Then how was dealing with your customers? Did they heavily rely on this local relationship that you offered to them, or was the Salzgitter name maybe more of the sales driver for them? How do you look at the American market or American customer through the lens of the German CEO for a US subsidiary?
I think it's important to have a local presence. I always did, and I still do, because the local customers here, and obviously look at your side of the business, the legal side, right? They like to have somebody local that they can come and kind of choke their throat if they have to. That's much harder if you only have
I
a
try to
partner in
stay out of
Germany.
that.
Not on this side, but so local entity here invoicing them under Texas law. They know the law, they know how it works, they know what the differences are or not. They can stay in their own realm of doing business much easier than dealing with two different ways of handling law and everything that comes with it, right? Also in contracts and everything. And people being 7 hours away. So the local presence certainly made a difference. And that was very helpful. But there is something to be said about Salzgitter and the tremendous brand that they have built over decades. That name carries weight, and that weight is very much quality driven. So that was a great door opener always for any kind of discussion. If you throw in the name Salzgitter or Mannesmann, that opens many doors that we probably with some other name wouldn't have opened. So it's a combination of both.
And we obviously see that with a lot of European, other German brands, companies, where they have such a reputation for quality, a quality product. And maybe then if you compare it to the pricing that you probably have to charge for the Salzgitter German steel as compared to steel from other regions of the world, do you think that the American customer still values that over pricing? Because sometimes clients feel like, no, we have to charge less, or we have to charge the same as we're charging in Germany or in Europe. How would you, or how did you approach those discussions with customers? Also within the group, maybe.
I mean, for us, and that's where, again, the quality comes in, Manny. For us, the only products we could really sell here were the higher end, higher quality, niche. Probably there was like a specific chemistry in the steel that they needed that they couldn't get locally because Salzgitter is fully integrated. So they can essentially cook up whatever steel you need. Very different when you're a scrap-based steel mill and you have to live with whatever is in the scrap that you buy, right? Like the mini mills here in the US usually are. And that is one of these advantages. And then if you get the exact product you need to make the exact product work that you want to buy or make, that's worth some money. So for us, the discussion was really with the niche of the niche customers. And it always went about, okay, what is the extra value you get here? And what is that worth to you? And usually that came out to where the pricing we had out of Europe made sense. But if, for example, like an everyday vanilla product, if you will, steel drums, right? That's kind of low quality steel, nothing bad about it, but you compare that to everybody else's steel and that is a plain price comparison. There's nothing to be said about quality or certain things that need to be very specific. That's just a very cheap product, and that's where we wouldn't be competitive. And that's not the market, frankly, that we wanted to tackle.
So it's more value driven, the classic, what's in it for me, a sales approach rather than competing on price.
And the other thing we did, and that's I think where some of our value came in, is that we obviously had partners here that were able to stock some of the steel, like store it for a while, because there is a gap. Like when you place a purchase order for steel from Germany here in the US, it's going to take between 3 and 4 months to get here. So you need enough buffer if you continuously need the product that you always have some for your production. If a vessel is delayed, if there is bad weather, if something doesn't go quite the way it's supposed to go, if a train gets stuck in Lower Saxony because there is a once in 100-year snowstorm or something, and all of a sudden you miss the boat and then you have to wait for the next one. Like these types of things you cannot plan for. That's just force majeure. So you have to make sure that on this side of the pond, you always kind of have a buffer stock that helps you bridge these times, and you just fill it up again as new steel comes in. And that's the kind of service we were delivering to people, to put them as close as we could to whatever service experience they have for the domestics.
As you probably know, to interject some legalese here, maybe it's not necessarily a force majeure event in Lower Saxony to have a snowstorm, right? It could
Maybe it's not.
probably, and that's the point, right? Then in the US, you completely different legal system. You may not want to rely on it. But if we're generalizing it, I think that's a good maybe discussion point here for other European companies. How important do you think it is for European companies to have the kind of direct access to the products that the American customers need? Because it's more of a just-in-time approach here in the US than, hey, I'll wait for this 3, 4, 5, 6 months if it's more of a commodity product. How, if you could give some advice here to other European companies with sales offices here in the US and then manufacturing or production facilities in Europe, and then US customers have to wait.
I always put this in similar discussions on somewhat of a timeline, right? Where you say, okay, ideally, you're local. You're a German producer who has some production in the US. You bring in some raw materials or you buy them here, whatever, and you make your product in the US as close as you can to the customer. That'll avoid political problems. That'll avoid exchange rate problems. That'll avoid tariffs, all these types of things that go into consideration when you think about how you set yourself up for success. Then on the other spectrum, it's okay, we don't have an office in the US. We do it all off Germany. We want to sell German products from Germany to the US. That would be the other extreme, which I don't think long-term that has any chance of to success. It's too difficult. It's too remote. There is just too much stuff to cut through to make it successful. So when you put yourself somewhere in the middle and you say, I don't know if we want this millions and millions of dollars investment in the US to make production, but we can have a warehouse, we can have local people, we can have an office, we can have assembly, whatever it is. Then the question becomes, okay, you're somewhere in the middle now. Now, how do you bridge that piece that is missing to putting yourself in the customer's eye to where you are very comparable from a service perspective to a local supplier? So the further you go to, we do everything out of Germany, the more you have to think about how do you bridge that gap that is there to your competition. And you have to get something good and planned to make it work.
And that obviously through the lens of a CEO or CEO's perspective, what would you advocate for? Or what did you advocate for?
Go as much local in the US as you can. Absolutely, 100% every time.
So it's maybe the risk adversity. You have to look at it from through a different lens, right?
Yeah, because I think you actually take more risk if you stay all in Germany than you take when you're coming over here. It just has to be planned out. The biggest thing I always see many, and I guess you'll most probably see it the same way. People assume that people, meaning Germans, assume they come here and everything is the same, right? We look the same, somewhat of a different language. Okay, we all had some English in school. We can bridge that, no problem. When you then come here, people are nice and everything is cool. When you try to do business here, there is actually a different culture and there is distinct differences between Germany and the US. So you cannot just, it's not a plug and play scenario. You can't just take what made you successful in Germany, come to the US and think that you'll do great. That is not going to happen.
The US is not waiting for the German company, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to your story for a little bit because we'll have more do's and don'ts later on where you can share your experience and talk about it more. But as you mentioned, like you stayed with Salzgitter, you pretty much ran the US market with the team. What happened then? How long did you stay with Salzgitter? What was your next step? What was the pivot then afterwards? What are you doing?
I stayed with Salzgitter until end of 2023, took on a couple more roles afterwards, and then started building out my own practice, first on the side, and obviously now I'm doing that full time. So what has always driven me, bothered me, if you will, is my grandpa was a carpenter in Germany. So I grew up in his shop in an entrepreneurial family from age 4. And he died 2 years into retirement-ish and left my grandma what even at the time was not a lot of money because the business never scaled to any kind of level that was commercially really interesting other than putting food on the table, right? Nothing bad about that. It's just that my grandpa was a great carpenter, but he was not a well-educated businessman. He just wasn't. And that's what I see in many small and medium-sized companies compared to German Mittelstand, where family-owned and the owner has everything going through their desks, takes each and every decision, works 60 to 80 hours. That is not a system. That's an expensive job. And the cost, meaning expensive, the cost you pay for like in the business, because at some point you stop growing because the owner is the limit. The other thing is on the personal side. What I hear owners oftentimes tell me is that they have problems in their marriage. They don't see their kids. They don't see any theater plays because they're working all the time. And that is really the kind of market that I want to work with and the people I want to help. And with my 20 years operator experience, 20 plus years operator experience in any kind of, some kinds of steel business, which all were smaller businesses in themselves, just belonging to a bigger entity. I've been there. I've seen it, the good and the bad, and I know how to change it. So that's where the pivot really came from.
And what exactly are you then now doing for maybe European companies or other companies here in the US that would rely on this, of course, executive perspective, but then also your experience in the market as such?
So what I do is I essentially teach and facilitate an operating system which builds the structure of the business. How are decisions taken? Like, what does your decision right matrix look like? What does your functional seat chart look like an org chart on steroids, right? It's all about the structure first and which role is in charge of what 5 most important things. And then you put in names. We're not saying, hey, Manny is the CEO. He is good at this and this and this. So this is what the CEO does. It's vice versa. Like the CEO is this position. This is what we expect from the CEO. And look, Manny is a good fit. So you might or might not get that seat in the end. That's where it all starts, because I feel that this is the foundation of doing everything right. Many business owners come here and then the first thing is always sales, right? Yeah, we need more sales. With more sales, it's more revenue, more profit, and then we can pay all the stuff we have to pay for. I think that's a Milchmädchenrechnung. I don't know the English translation, I'm sorry. But it is to where, I mean, if you have a leaky pipe in your house, water is going to come out. And that's the same here. You will be paying for your mistakes and the problems that you have in your business if you just work on revenue, more sales, and whatever it is. You have to have the right structure in place. And that's about coaching the CEO, coaching the leadership team to first implement that structure and then them teaching it to the rest of the organization. And that's what I do.
Why do you think that's important for, in particular, European companies doing business here in the US? You already mentioned culture, language.
Yeah. I think it's important for any kind of company, specifically for European companies, I think, and especially when they come over here, they will run into all kinds of problems they never foresaw. Cultural, language, business usances, legal. There are so many things that are different, but don't look as complex and complicated when you take it for face value. So if you have a structure in place and you know that the CEO can spend most of their time working on the business instead of in the business, you know that they have the time that they need and the guidance and the help to maneuver all the other stuff that's going to come at them that they don't even think about. And I think that's important. And I believe that that's where most businesses that end up going back and complaining that the US is a bad place to do business, what they get caught in, because they thought they can just come here, plug and play for cheap. That's not how it works.
So then what does the typical European or other company that you help with look like? Is it a certain industry, a certain size, structure?
Most of the companies I work with are in the industrial space, manufacturing. That's just because of my history and the operator knowledge I have accumulated over the years. But I do have a couple of clients in IT. I do have one in food distribution. So it could be anything. For the system, it doesn't really matter. It's just that my background kind of more caters to the industrial and the manufacturing space. So that's the people I talk to. Usually 5 to 50 million in revenue, which I would call classic Mittelstand. Could be a little bigger. They have a good product. They have a good market. And then they think what to do next. They probably can't grow in their home market anymore. Mostly Germany, Austria, Netherlands, wherever they are. And then they look beyond that and say, oh, the US is a good market. And I personally believe it still is. Yeah, that's where the discussions start.
Obviously, I have to ask, if you personally believe that the US is still a good market, what makes you think that way?
Well, just look at the economic strength of many of the states here. Look at the top economies of the world. Look at, frankly, some of the developments that German companies just go through with their subsidiaries they build in China and other places in the world, and how those companies' subsidiaries are doing in the US. And look at the future prospect. I think, like from an economic perspective, there is a lot of runway here that needs and wants to be harvested. The other things, and that's obviously another way to get into the market that I've talked to a couple companies from Germany about, is you don't have to do everything from scratch. You could also think about buying a US company that is in your market, not necessarily selling their product or keeping it and adding your own whatsoever. And obviously with, all the baby boomers retiring the next 10 to 15 years, there's a lot of businesses out there that are for sale right now. And coming at it that way, entering a market and putting the right structure in, making sure you're safe and sound with the contracts you have and everything. So the German angst of being sued by someone kind of goes away, maybe. Yeah, it's a good playing field.
Then why do you think, obviously I see it in my daily job as well, the classic market entry strategy is still, let's set up a US subsidiary, maybe we'll get 1 or 2 employees, sales-focused employees, or we work with a distributor. Why do you think so many German and other European companies still opt for this approach rather than maybe the more aggressive growth M&A transaction approach to enter the US market?
I think it's risk aversity, honestly. And that is different for us here in the US. And I'm a good example, right? If I would have stayed in Germany, I probably wouldn't have made that move that I made. Being here for this amount of time and kind of getting accustomed to the environment and to the way people are doing things in the US, that changed for me personally. And it changed me too. Well, and you see the result of where I am today versus where I was 10 years ago. And I think that's that perspective, again, it's about perspectives, right? This perspective is totally lacking for a lot of German companies because obviously they just don't have that. They look at it only and singularly through the lens that they have. Oftentimes they don't consult with other people who've been there, done it, with people who are probably more risk takers. That doesn't mean you have to listen to them 100%, but just get a good perspective of what the options are. And then you can still run the math on it and come up with the best scenario for yourself. But it's always simple to go the beaten path. And I believe, again, that is a mistake.
You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? If you just get the right experience and the right advisors.
Exactly. And you can obviously find examples for any way of doing it, right? There's lots of people in, like, we built this, we only had a sales office, we bought a company, we invested in a company, we had a distribution partner. There's enough people in every kind of particular journey that have done it that you could tap into and talk to find out what their journey looks like. But again, I think it's a lot of like risk affinity or adversity that drives people to take certain decisions a certain way. And somehow in my mind, and that's what I do coach a lot, is not about checklists that you work off. Like another checklist is not going to fix your business. I coach judgment. And this is a judgment decision too, right? In some way, shape or form, you have to take the emotion out and take the decision that's best for the business. So the business owner is usually not the best person to look into all of this and prepare it. He or she is usually the one that has the final say and decision to take. But certainly somebody else, ideally a group of advisors from legal, insurance, banking, the people you'll have to work with anyways if you start this here, they should be thinking through this and come up with options probably and weighing in. And I think that would lead to vastly different viewpoints and hopefully in the end also decisions, which are just better and make German businesses on this side of the pond more successful.
Well, then as they think about expanding to the US, and obviously I know you've been very active in the European business community, also steel-related business community, and you also see companies come and go, very excited about entering the US market, then rapidly leaving the US market again, but then also that those companies that do really make it big here in the US. What do you think, on the one hand, are some of the big mistakes that European companies, as they enter the US, aside from maybe working with the advisors or just focusing on sales too much rather than the core strategies from, as you said, an operational standpoint? What do you see some of those mistakes they're making?
I mean, some of it is, I think, the service aspect, which is very different here. You can see it when you come to a US restaurant versus a German restaurant. Look at the amount of service. Look at the touch points you have with your server while you're in the restaurant. You have a hard time because you have to turn them down all the time. And when they come and ask if they can help you with something else, in Germany, you have a hard time to find a server sometimes who gets you what you want, right? Doctor's offices in Germany, you go and make a doctor's appointment. You go to the doctor. That's it. You make an appointment for 2 weeks out. You show up, appointment done, you go home. Here, you get somewhere between 5 and 10 calls and 27 text messages to remind you of the exact time when you have to show up and all these things. So that it's very different. And that's a cultural thing. You have to follow up with people before a call or a podcast recording, probably, because if you don't, they might not show up. It's just different. So there's cultural differences in this, and you just have to account for that, and you have to behave accordingly. That's also why I think it's dangerous to just get 2 German salespeople on a visa over here and call it an office. That's never going to work. Yeah, and then there is a mismatch sometimes between what Germans think a great product and a great service that goes along with it is great. From this side of the pond, it might look different. So it makes total sense to talk to the potential buyers and find out what they really want, what they like, and how that makes their life easier and better. Because otherwise, you might be stuck with a product or a service that you really can't market successful, and then you're out faster than you're in. I think in Germany also there's, like we said before, you commit to something, you do it, right? There is some kind of a cultural glue that holds everything together. There's unspoken rules that everybody lives by. The Americans call us over-engineered. And while I do think truthfully that they kind of have a point, at least from their point of view, that is different here. You need a structure in place early on so everybody can live and breathe in that structure and create that cultural glue through the structure. But it is an outcome of it. It's not a given that kind of forms a structure after the fact. So the approach is just different, and you need to know that going in.
So one of the lessons is that doing business in the US is quite different from doing business in Europe. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you've been here for quite some time. Already you've seen different administrations come and go, different industry cycles, economic cycles. You've been in different areas, regions of the country. You have exposure to different areas and regions of the country. How has the business landscape, if at all, changed over the years here in the US, and maybe also through a transatlantic perspective?
Here in the US, what I saw a lot, many over the years, so I've been here for 11 years now. I've worked with the US for 20 plus years, out of Germany first. In the early days, I don't know, I'll give you an example, like a product like tin plate for cans, right? There were so many little companies and mom and pop shops that would do a decent volume to import and customers we have. So now there's probably 3 or 4 big ones left. Like we've seen in many industries, big consolidation, that just bigger companies buy up smaller ones, grow their footprint. Lately, that has more been a trend, I would say, with private equity companies that start buying up, be that HVAC companies, roofing companies, laundromats, whatever you will. So there's another consolidation going on. Obviously, that has been sharpened, I want to say, by the fact that you have baby boomers going out of business. People that come to an age where they don't want their business anymore, they're going to sell it. And sometimes the PE companies, in an effort to get a certain kind of business to scale, they buy smaller companies, and they might pay a better price than the operator who wants to buy a business to run it, to own it and operate it. So there's a lot of that going on. The other thing is obviously the speed of business. Like in the beginnings, well, I don't even want to talk about facts, because if our kids watch this in the future at some point, they think we're dinosaurs. But business was done different, and it was done at a different speed. It was much more in-person interactions. There was sometimes no other way to do it, right? And now think phone conferences with a spider phone thingy on the table. That's long gone. We're living in Teams and Zoom and communicate through Slack internally, WhatsApp, whatever is there. There's so many different platforms to share content, documents. You don't have to sign me anything anymore, and I sign it with wet ink and send it back to you by courier or by fax or whatever. You send me like a DocuSign or something, and we do it online with a secure signature. So things really have changed, which allowed us to just speed up the process so much that I feel this, if you look at it like a sinus curve or something, you still have these waves coming and going, but they're just so much more compressed on the timeline, and everything is so much faster. So I feel that you have to stay consistently on your toes. And I believe that in a country like US, with this technical affinity and all these things going somewhat faster than in other countries, maybe the pressure just got a little higher and the timeline got compressed faster because we can accomplish much more in way less time.
Well, then with increased pressure, the likelihood of major pitfalls probably also increases, right? Because whether it's internal pressure, external pressure, dealing with the pressure, and you probably know better than I do, having run the or having had the CEO hat on, what do you think are some of the major pitfalls that European companies underestimate here in the US? And what should they know before they even set up shop here in the US?
I mean, I don't want this to sound like a promotion for you, Manny, but in the end, you have to look at the legal side.
That's what we're doing this for.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I have my notes here. Let me rattle it off. I really do believe, and you and I have been through some of this together. You have to have, for example, an employee handbook. You need to have a certain set of rules that your employees have to abide by. Again, that comes back to the structural piece on the commercial side. The mirror of that on the legal side is a proper employee handbook. You have to have rules, and everybody has to sign for the fact that they have read and understand a copy of it. You have to have proper contracts in place that govern certain things. Well, okay, where are we going to go if something is going wrong? Is that an arbitration? Do we go straight to court? No jury? What's going to happen? So the one side obviously wants it very simple, so they can get their money as fast as they can. The other side wants it very fair. So you have to make sure that that's covered and both parties sign. And if not, then you have to make sure that, the battle of the documents, who sends what, when. You just have to get clear on what you have to do. And for that, I think you need some professional advice. The company set up something, again, that we've been through together, like how do you set up a company properly here? What does your operating agreement have to look like? Do you do an annual report? Yeah, sure you do. Well, what do you cover? What do you put in there? What do you get approval for from the owners of the company? Because it's outside of the regular scope of business. What can you do? So the decision rights matrix we talked about before, that has to be written down somewhere so that somebody comes in the end, if there's a problem, can go through a structured set of documents and exactly see how and why you took decisions you have been taking and make sure that that's done correctly. So you're just safe. I think that's the most important step to start with.
And one thing that I'd like to get your perspective on, because as you can imagine, I have a very strong perspective on when it comes to contracts that you just mentioned. Whenever I do seminars, whenever I do workshops, a lot of German Mittelstand companies or other European Mittelstand companies, mid-market, hidden champions, and we talk about the freedom of contract. Whatever you put in your agreements governs the agreements. They say, well, we're negotiating with the big OEMs, and it's a take it or leave it approach in the US. Right? We don't get to negotiate anything. You probably were on the other side of the table where there was a big OEM behind you, having worked for Salzgitter. How do you approach that? Would you agree with that? Do you think there's always room to negotiate in the US market, even with the big OEMs, just as a few general token, without maybe just saying at the outset, well, if we want this deal, we have to sign this agreement, take it or leave it, even if the OEMs say that?
Well, I have a very strong opinion on that as well. I mean, in case something smells like fish, probably is fish. So that's my opinion, meaning that, yes, I've been in many of those discussions, and with some of them, for example, if it's a big German company you work with at home and you work with them here, that's one story. But then it's a big, US company that you work with here, a big OEM that you don't have any relationship with so far, and this will be the entrance. But the contract they give you, if two things go wrong, you can fold up your business. Don't sign the contract. Find somebody else to do business with. It's very simple. And that's where some people then want to take when the eyes were bigger than the stomach, we say, right? Like when you shove more food in than you can digest. That's the same thing here. Like this is just too big a risk. And I've seen many, many people and companies here struggle in the end and get into serious trouble. And it doesn't even have to be illegal. If there is a clause in the contract, which your lawyer will tell you that X, Y, and Z happens, they stop buying material from you. But say you have to have a 4-month stock to be able to cater to them because your material is coming from abroad, right? So to be able to fulfill all your contractual obligations, you have to have so and so much material. Imagine it's super niche specialized for them. You can't sell it anywhere else. So you just sign the contract that won't allow you to give it to them anymore. And you have to live with that. No judge in the world will give you that money or force your client to buy it, but you can't sell it anywhere either. At that point, you're getting pennies on the dollars when you scrap it or throw it away or whatever you're going to do with it. And that's probably going to bury your company. So don't sign the contract.
And on top of that, I would also add that it's simply a myth. Everything is up for negotiation, even if it's just one
Yeah.
specific clause, right? Just because the OEM tells you, throws their weight around and says, oh no, this is our form, this is our standard. Everybody who's doing business with us needs to sign it. That's not
Well,
the
if they, I
case.
mean,
That's
and
probably
in all reality, you have to go in from the perspective that you're not going to sign it. But obviously, you tell them that if they are willing to abide by your clauses, you will sign. They will certainly go out and talk to everybody and their brother, and they have enough people to do that. If they find enough that sign the contract as it is, you don't get business. If they don't, I'm sure they will come back to you and renegotiate. That's just how it works.
maybe let's talk about success story, either your personal Salzgitter success story or any other companies that you've helped navigate the US market with. Any success stories you might want to share there?
Yeah, sure. We can talk about, to not make it too singular on one company, talk about a client of mine that's a small steel service center in Chicago. We've started working together end of 2024, and he called me mid 25 and told me that he was on the way to double his revenue in 2025 from where he was in 24. And that's one of the most awesome success stories. I don't think the numbers really matter, because what matters is the structure behind and the system. So if you give yourself some rules and you do the right things and you follow through on them, and you have someone who holds yourself accountable, which you can never hold yourself accountable. Like, you need an outside partner to do that. You can reach awesome things. Anyone can. And that's kind of my systems advocacy. It was all about putting the structure in place, making sure you have the right functional seat chart, who has what, who is in charge of what. You have a scorecard that you look at on a weekly basis. So how many people have you called? Like, there's leading and lagging indicators, right? Revenue is lagging, that has happened already. Profit is lagging, that has happened. But then to get to those, to make revenue, you need to talk to people. So you mix it up between those two. You look at that with a 13-week trajectory, and you need to make sure that you stay on track. And usually that like these simple things, they're not easy to implement and they're not easy to stick with, but they're so important to bring your business forward. And that's all the things that a lot of companies are lacking.
Maybe by doubling your revenue via the right structures and operations and just checks and balances, as I would probably say from a legal perspective, and the sheer size of the US market. What do you think is still holding European companies back from entering the US market?
One thing is, what would you call that? Like legalophobia or something? Like, let's think that a lot. I think that a lot of people are afraid of the US legal system and case law versus common law, things that are just different, unknown. And there is, and the numbers are big and the lawyers are more expensive and all that, but there is ways to navigate that and to keep your company and yourself safe. That's one of the things. And then the big tariff discussions always, well, just another point to say, if you're here, like, the more you can move your presence to this side of the pond, the more you can eliminate some of these risks of doing business here. The unknown, a lot of people are just personally afraid to get into territory that's kind of unknown, foreign, different language. But yeah, what is my question to those companies and those owners is always, what options do you have? Like, what is your growth going to look like in Germany for the next 10 years? I always only hear of companies closing, industries going away, things getting more difficult. When I come home and switch on WDR 2 to hear the Bundesliga conference on Saturdays, right? Every half hour on the news, it's all doom and gloom. Sometimes makes me want to turn around and go back home. But you got to stick your head through that fog and look forward and think hard about who you are and who you want to be and what you want your company to be 10 years from today. And then the options are limited. Russia is out. There's a war going on there. Many people figure out that China is not the right market, or anything in Southeast Asia, maybe for that matter as well. So they look west and they see the US and Canada mainly.
Speaking about looking forward and transitioning, the next segment of the show is the Core Four.
Up next, the Core Four,
which is essentially the segment where I ask the same 4 questions to every guest on every episode. The next Core Four will be all for you. Are you ready?
Next up, the Core Four.
First of the Core Four, challenges. What do you think, maybe currently or historically, are the biggest challenges European businesses face in the US market?
I believe one of the big ones really is more, again, a perspective question, that they think they have a great product. It's very well known in Germany. And everybody, when they come over here, wants to rip it out of their hands and put it in their home, put it in their factory, whatever. And that's just not the case. So you got to come here, you got to talk to people, you have to build trust. And those are all things you can start doing before you even come here. You have to show up to actual shows, you have to give presentations, you have to give samples, you have to keep explaining. And the old rule that you have to hear something 7 times to hear it once applies in any kind of business you do. So that's where a lot of effort has to go.
Second of the core 4 is about lessons learned. And I'm sure you've, in your professional life, have learned some lessons. So if you could give one piece of advice to a European company entering the US or even doing business in the US, what would it be?
The one is ask the question. You don't understand something, you're not 100% sure. Bear in mind, it's not your home turf and not everything is what it seems to be. Just ask the question. You don't look dumb. To the contrary, people appreciate that. Yeah, that one extra question can save you a lot of dollars and get you a lot of more profit.
You're almost talking like a lawyer here.
Oh, well.
Sometimes clients should ask more questions before they start.
Yes, and ask your lawyer the questions too. I mean, it's you need to understand, right? Don't sign any document. That's another big one for me. Don't sign any document you do not 100% understand.
Talk about the positive. The third of the core 4 is a future outlook. So what do you see shaping the business environment for European companies in the US over the next few years? Of course, AI, everything, the tariffs that you already mentioned. What do you think the business environment will be like for European companies in the US?
I think it is a very fertile ground because Americans see Germany as a high quality manufacturer of many products. They see Germany as a country and people with high standards. They see Germany as reliable. Like the Germans say something, they do it. We come over a little edgy sometimes too, but generally I think that Germans are very well liked in the US and German products are very high regarded, which again, it's the Salzgitter story, right? Others don't have that luxury. So that's a big plus for German and Austrian companies for that matter. Using that, coming over here, I think is a key advantage compared to others, especially in the next years. There's obviously many people who try to invest a lot of money here and bring their products and establish a brand. And that will happen over time. Right now, I would say that Germany is one step ahead of others and you should capitalize on that. And especially now going in here, the other thing to me is the more Germans are coming over, the more that German footprint get expanded, the more that availability of high quality German product and the perception of German products as high quality products grows. So that community effect of doing this as a team, like compared to the World Cup, we have, 28 players that come from all kinds of different clubs and they play against each other every weekend. But once every 4 years, they come together with one jersey and as one team and they go out and they represent Germany. I do believe that the Germans really, German companies should really make an effort to come over here in a more consolidated approach to represent Germany as one brand instead of each doing their own because they don't want to share anything or they're afraid that somebody's going to steal something for them. I think that'll do good things for the reputation of Germany and for the German business community here. And frankly, for the Americans, because you buy a German product, I don't want to name names, but think about high quality vacuums or household appliances. That's probably going to last you for 30 years, which is different from other products you get in the market.
Well, with a great team, I have to pick up on that one. It usually comes great success. And the success factors is the fourth and last question of the core 4. So what do you think sets, I'll ask you 6 questions and you can only pick one answer. Are you ready?
And now, rapid fire, this or that.
Question number 1, Cologne or Mönchengladbach?
That's easy. It's Cologne.
Question number 2, Oktoberfest or Schützenfest?
Schützenfest, for sure.
That hurts.
I'm sorry.
Question number 3, Lufthansa or United Airlines?
That's more difficult, but I'm going to say United.
Question number 4, Kölsch or Hefeweizen?
Alcoholfrei.
Both can be non-alcoholic.
Then the Kölsch, obviously.
Want to try that? No judgment. Question number 5, Rammstein or Helene Fischer?
Rammstein.
And question number 6, very personal, CEO or coach?
That's a good one too, coach.
That was the rapid fire, this or that. And now we're already getting to the final part of the show. And it's more about kind of your personal experiences, your first impressions about doing business in America. Any culture shock experience, anything that you didn't expect, especially coming from Chicago to Houston, other parts of the US? How has that transition been for you? And maybe for some good as well as some bad examples.
I think it's stages, right? For example, take distance. Everything in Germany is close. You can usually easily do 4 meetings in a day and see your doctor in between for a nice tooth cleaning or whatever you have to do in Germany. In Chicago, not so much. In Houston, even less. So the vast size of the city's traffic and unforeseen circumstances, be that, oh, all of a sudden there's a thunderstorm here that nobody knew was coming in. And within 5 minutes, everything is flooded and you're stuck. Like, you're not getting anywhere for an hour. So I think you have to really relax. That's one of the learnings for me. And you have to just take it easy. And sometimes you have to move things around and make accommodations because things just happen. And with the distances and the amount of people here, it's different. Another thing is too, that a lot of business is still done, I feel, in person, over lunches, dinners, playing golf, going to watch a baseball game or football game or soccer game with your customer or client, whatever it is. So it's really about building that relationship and bonding with them, more so than necessarily the last bit of the pricing or the last nuance of the product that you offer. That is also very, very different. Yeah, those are two good ones I can think of from top of mind.
Yeah. And over the years, having been here for quite some time now, have you personally picked up any, what we might consider American habits?
Yeah, when I go back and I stay in a hotel, I really try to find someone that has a properly working AC. Very un-German maybe, but I just can't do it anymore. And obviously, given we're in Texas, I'm driving my car anywhere. I think I haven't touched a bike in 5 years.
The indoor bike, the Loton. Yeah, it's a nice substitute. Yeah, I think you're close to committing suicide riding a bicycle on Texas roads.
Yeah.
You're one of the least popular individuals on the road. You've been to Chicago, now Houston. Are there any favorite US cities to visit for business in particular?
For business in particular to visit, I say it's still Chicago. For me, obviously, I always liked Chicago for one. The other thing is that there's a lot of memories. That's where we first came when we came over from Germany. That's where I saw my kids get into elementary school and then through to high school before we moved here. Made a lot of friends there, and it's always good to go back and see them and try to do business with them.
Is there an American business leader, past or present, who you would like to maybe grab dinner with, have lunch with? Obviously, you're in the coaching business, but someone who you think not only you could benefit, but really also the European business approach to fully Americanize?
Do they have to be alive?
No, alive
Okay.
or dead.
I'd say Dale Carnegie. That would be super cool.
Have you read his autobiography? Yeah.
And how to make friends, and I don't know exactly what it's called anymore, but he put out cool stuff that's very old, obviously, but still as valid as it was the day when he wrote it.
How to
That would be
win
an interesting
friends
guy to
and
meet.
influence people, right?
Yep. That would be a really interesting guy to meet.
So what's one thing now, if you had to pick one, or if you can pick one thing that you love about helping European companies make it big in America?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I like to help people. I like to help businesses. I wish I could have helped my grandpa's business. And that is something, if I can help someone save themselves some of the trouble and the pain in money and emotions and whatever comes with it to try and start a business or get it off the ground or grow it and not be able to, that's an awesome day and an awesome engagement. And I think that's the most important.
If I am one of those companies that says, oh my God, Thomas, great guy, fantastic looking guy in particular, and I really want to work with him, how can our audience connect with you? Where can they find you? What's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
Well, there's 3 great ways to get a hold of me. The one is my LinkedIn. Obviously, I have my contact data on there. So if you find me on LinkedIn, please feel free to connect, reach out. I'm happy to talk to anyone. No sales pitch, just talk and try to help and provide some value. My website, rechtienconsult.com, is also a good source of information. Plus, there's a contact form that you can fill out and get a hold of me that way. And then obviously, if they can't find me, they can just ask you and you can point them in the right direction. That's the third way.
Correct. I think I have to pick that up and flip it around going forward. But yeah, obviously we'll connect all of those ways to connect with you. We'll add those in the show notes. And that way it's the easiest, hopefully, for our audience to reach out to you. Do you have a personal quote or motto that guides you in business and in life?
Yeah, there's a couple, but I can't repeat those here. I would have to think with something, but
Whatever that means.
it's appropriate for this podcast. I can't come up with something right now.
Then maybe the final question, which dealing with a lawyer, there's always a catch-all at the very end. Anything else you'd like to share? Anything else you feel is important for our audience as the final takeaway before we close up shop here today?
Yeah, I think again, if you say important for your audience, I take it that those are people who own or run a business somewhere in Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, whatsoever, say, call it European companies. They're thinking about expanding. They're thinking about where they can do it. And that's probably how they ended up reading your book, listening to your podcast, right? So they've come to the right place. Now it's about to connect with the people that they find on your podcast and just reach out and have a chat. The second step is really come over here and take a look for yourself. Don't take anybody's word for granted. Come over, sit down with the people, have a dinner, get 3-4 people together for dinner and just ask all the questions you have. I think that is the best way to, you don't get your feet wet in that sense, but you get a good impression. You get to meet some Germans and some other Europeans here that have made it in America and have done it, have been there, and that are great resources for you moving forward.
Fantastic final words. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your insights. Great, obviously, to share your story. And I'm sure we'll do this again in the future with more updates, because I think both of us still plan on doing this for a few more years. So thank you very much for your insights. It was a lot of fun. And I wish you, of course, personally, as well as your family, your business, nothing but the best for the future. And look forward to hearing more about it. Wait. Before you go, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one. And if you have thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like me to cover, drop a comment. I read every single one. If you're serious about entering or scaling in the US market, head over to masteringmarketentry.com or mannyschoenhuber.com for more insights and resources. Thanks for listening, and until next time, go out there and make it big in America.